Japan is likely to impose a state of emergency as the number of COVID-19 cases continues to rise in the country. According to Japanese news agencies, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is likely to declare a state of emergency as the number of infected cases surged to more than 1,000 in capital Tokyo alone. This comes as a second surge in the number of infected cases in the country, and this recent spike has sparked a cause of concern for the government. Shinzo Abe is likely to announce the emergency today and new measures likely to follow from Tuesday. Under a new amendment to combat the spread of the virus, the Prime Minister can declare a state of emergency if the disease poses a grave danger to the lives of the people and the economy of the country. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said that any declaration would be comprehensive and would be based on the opinions of experts. The declaration could go into effect as Japan's biggest ever stimulus package worth $550 billion is set to be announced on Tuesday. After the postponement of the Summer Olympics 2020 in Japan, the country is now faced with a new danger due to the new coronavirus pandemic, where after a sudden surge of over 1,000 infected cases in capital Tokyo alone, the country is now all set to impose an emergency, a country-wide emergency, even as it prepares to offer a stimulus package worth $550 billion, the biggest ever in the history of Japan. We have our correspondent Grace Lee now joining us with a live ground report straight from Japan's capital, Tokyo. Grace, talk to us. News agencies in Japan are saying that this state of emergency could be announced any time today. What are you picking up?
Yeah, we just heard from Japan's governor an hour ago saying that she is preparing for Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to make that declaration any time now. It could come as soon as tomorrow, with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe potentially confirming today that he will make that statement. Now, the big question is what happens here in Tokyo after he makes that declaration. Well, it seems things aren't going to change that much for now based on what we know about the emergency. Likely, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and local governors would then be allowed to ask schools to shut down, ask people to stay indoors, largely measures that have already been implemented here in Tokyo. People are already trying to stay indoors as much as possible. Schools have been shut down for about a month now, so it's not quite clear what further steps would be taken once the state of emergency is announced.
Grace, as we speak, Tokyo is witnessing a resurgence in the number of positive COVID-19 cases. Talk to us about the ground situation in the capital.
Yeah, the situation is looking more and more grim here in Tokyo. We saw another record high on Sunday with over 140 cases now. The biggest problem that we have here, according to medical experts, is that we don't have enough doctors who have the medical expertise to deal with COVID-19 patients. That means doctors who are equipped to use ventilators and other emergency equipment that they would need to help these patients breathe. And so they're saying that even if there's enough bed space and even if there's enough equipment, Tokyo or Japan as a whole has about 6,500 medical beds that can help treat these patients. Only about 1,000 of them would be used because of the lack of doctors here. And that's all according to a local report here. And they say that the situation is looking increasingly dire. They're already running out of bed space in some of the locations across Japan. So doctors and medical experts are now gearing up to see what happens if we continue to see that curve trend upwards as we have so far.
But Grace, and this state of emergency that can be declared by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Japan is enabled due to an amendment to the Japanese constitution, and it's a decision that can be taken only when the people of lives are at stake and the economy is at stake.
Yeah, and the economy is something that the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that he's very concerned about, especially seeing how the Olympics are being pushed back as well. That's a huge source of revenue that's no longer existing this year. And of course, the lack of tourism from China has also been a big hit on Japan. So there are a variety of factors apart from COVID-19 that are related to COVID-19, of course, that have already struck Japan in a very hard way. So now he's worried that if Tokyo, especially if the capital, goes into a state of emergency and essentially partly locked down, that would be another massive hit to Japan's economy. And that's certainly something that the government here doesn't want to see. But at this point, it looks like they might have no other choice.
Grace, another thing that's going to happen tomorrow is the fact that the $550 billion stimulus package for economic relief, the largest ever in Japan's history, that is set to be announced by the Japanese government.
Yeah, so Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said that this is a historic package, one of the biggest we've ever seen here in Japan. And it'll include likely a cash handout to residents and some assistance to local businesses, mostly targeting, it seems, small businesses, but also trying to help out the big businesses that have been hit especially hard by the Olympics being pushed back. Now, there has been some, people here who aren't really happy about the fact that, the extent of the economic package and the Prime Minister announcing the 2-mask system where he's going to send 2 masks to every household. They're saying that, sure, these are economic measures that will help, but they're not really tackling the monster that is COVID-19. Japan largely has been playing catch up with the disease so far and not really implementing a lot of measures, lockdown measures, that we've seen in other countries like the U.S., especially when they see this kind of curve upwards that Japan is seeing right now. So medical experts are saying, sure, the economic stimulus is great, but what we really need right now is some more measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19, which will in turn hit the economy if it spreads too far.
Grace, before we let you go, I also wanted to ask you, the number of cases reported in Japan are witnessing a resurgence. Do you think there was an effort to sort of underreport the numbers initially because they had an Olympics to hold sometime soon? And in that sense, Japan tried to keep things down or keep the panic levels down or keep the worries down by, sort of not taking into account the entire veracity of COVID-19 in the country.
Yeah, so that's a major concern here from citizens and residents who say that, look at the numbers that Japan has been producing so far. They've only been testing 800, 900 people per day on average. And then you see places like South Korea testing 20,000, 30,000 people per day. Japan had a very early head start in COVID-19. They got their cases relatively early, but now we're at this point where most of the cases in Tokyo, 2 out of 3 cases, they are not able to track where these where these infections came from. So that really means that we're seeing a community outbreak here. And the more difficult it becomes for the government to track where these outbreaks are coming from, the more likely it becomes that these will spread uncontrollably, especially in a place like Tokyo where we see high density and also a very elderly population here. It is not good for the future trajectory for COVID-19 here, and that's what people are really worried about. Now, did the Olympics have a factor in this? Well, critics say perhaps it was not a coincidence that Tokyo's governor made the announcement that Tokyo is in a critical stage the day after the Olympics were pushed back. And, that has certainly had a lot of eyebrows raised here, especially towards Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is once again putting the economy in the forefront of his battle against COVID-19 as well. So there is a lot of uncertainty there and a lot of people who are unhappy with how the government has been responding so far.
Grace Lee, our correspondent, joining us with that live ground report from Japan's capital, Tokyo. Thank you, Grace, for bringing us here on the broadcast on WION World as well.